So I've had a break out of spots. Something that hasn't happened since I was a teenager. So I'd just like to thank Legacy of the First Blade for allowing me to revisit my youth. Anyway, this video is powered by LAZERZ Entertainment. If you enjoyed this content, consider becoming a patron over on patreon.com/AsAlways for access to the Patreon exclusive podcast, The Kill Connor Clubhouse, early access to the Cinema Room podcast, being part of polls for future videos, and other early access material. With that said, please enjoy the video. I could have spent hours writing this script to make it perfectly idiot-proof, to word everything so perfectly so that no one could misconstrue what I was saying, so that nobody can argue my points with something I already debunked but they couldn't understand because it was too nuanced in my speech, so that everyone could understand perfectly the issues that I'm about to discuss. But then I realised I'm not trying to appeal to idiots. I'm trying to appeal to reasonable people. People that want to sit and listen to arguments, and that understand sometimes you don't have to have everything spelled out to you like you're a 5-year-old. And so I decided to scrap the idea of making a simplistic video that even a child could understand, and just aim at people my age, and at people of a similar mindset. People that like to think critically. People that maybe didn't like this DLC but can't put their finger on exactly why. People that maybe did like the DLC but are open to new ideas. And I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, rather than trying to sway people one way or another, especially the stubborn people. Before we get started, I want to have a spoiler warning, because we're going to be talking all sorts of spoilers in this video, so watch out. Not that I feel there's anything like that would ruin the experience. It sort of does that itself, but you know, if you are looking to play it, just don't watch this. But I would say don't play it. Anyway, okay. Before we start, I want to thank our Patreon producers, King Richard III, Seth, Josh Devillier, and Ikraik. Thank you all for your continued support. And anyways, let's begin. So first off, I wanted to talk about some of the basic gameplay, structural, story, sort of the main issues of the DLC. Not the big discrepancies, but just sort of like some of the main stuff. So first off, I noticed the game felt a lot like the last Maharaja DLC. And to me, Odyssey was already a bit bare bones, a bit shallow, a bit padded out, a little bit, you know, unpolished in areas, especially regarding dialogue. But this game, this DLC, specifically this episode, feels a lot more so. I noticed areas where it feels very strangely patched together. It almost reminds me of very, very old anime, where you've just got people in a room and they're being fed lines out of context, and they've kind of got to figure out exactly where that line goes. What emotion do they do? Someone goes, I read this in a sad way, or read this in an angry way, and they've got to kind of figure it out. They don't know the fucking context. That's what it sounded like.
How's my boy?
I don't think she's saying that to him.
Oh, he's in terrible danger because Elpidios is missing.
What?
And I hope that was the case, and not just that the actors are tremendously bad. The other thing is you've got things like the characters being named odd. I remember in the last Maharaja you had like damage done to vessel was one of the names above a health bar, or the life of the accountant, which was odd, very odd mix matching of the way that you would word things. And in this game, you've got individual characters being called the Immortals. Now, a lot of people didn't understand my criticism of this, because they were like, the Immortals is the name of the group. Yes, I know that. But let me put it in a different type of context. Imagine you were fighting a group of the Assassins. Just a group of Assassins. They're called the Assassins. Of course they are. Makes sense. But an individual man is not called the Assassins. It doesn't make sense. Imagine you were fighting an assassin and above his name said the Assassins. So he is the whole order. He represents the... Okay. And it's the same with the Immortals. It doesn't... Why is a single man called the Immortals? He just be called Immortal. Like... Or one of the Immortals, like, or an Immortal. Like, why are they calling them? It's just a weird thing that was odd, and you don't expect to find in AAA games. Again, like I said, padding. There's a lot of padding. A lot of the missions are just nothing. You're just doing things, and I was like, why am I doing this? It's unnecessary padding. Ubisoft haven't grasped the concept of what makes a good RPG, and it's not going from place to place to place doing mindless shit. My girlfriend, who I was playing with at the time, the DLC with at the time, who had never even touched Odyssey but has played all of the Assassin's Creed games prior, pretty much said it perfectly. talking about the way the world is built and the fact that it's so shallow.
This world has absolutely no depth in it. Because that music, for some reason, it does remind me of The Witcher, because it sounds a bit like, you know, the fighting music or something. Then I was reminded of The Witcher, and all I could think was, this looks like a fucking piece of paper, and The Witcher is like a 3D world.
Yeah, it's exactly.
It's really, there's nothing. It doesn't feel like I'm in a world at all. And
It feels like you're just going from thing to thing to thing through this copy and pasted area.
Yeah.
Doing things, like just completing, picking things off a list. You're not exploring.
It has no depth to it. It's like one fucking color. Everything is the same color.
Yeah.
It's also like, it's just really boring.
Another thing that I've noticed is that Ubisoft don't seem to understand basic writing techniques. It's almost as if a 5-year-old watched a movie, then they felt so satisfied by the ending, the way that it built up to it over the course of the movie, and then at the end it paid it all off, and the kid doesn't understand why, because they're just a child. And so when they try to write their own stories, they don't realize that build-up is crucial, development is crucial, and so what they would do is just write sort of bits and pieces here and there, and at the end they go, here's this big awesome thing, because in their head, they understand, they have a connection to these characters they've written, they have a connection to this story, and so to them the payoff is huge, to them the payoff is so special, but to anyone else looking at it, they don't get it, because they haven't had that connection to the story. They haven't had this connection to these characters, they haven't had the build-up. I know from first-hand experience, I did it as a kid. I used to write stories of my own after I'd experienced something that I really loved, and I wouldn't do any of that either, because I'm a child. But you don't expect that from a AAA video game studio. There's certain moments, such as the moment where your baby is stolen, that don't feel like there's any weight to it, because you haven't experienced proper development and slow-paced writing to build up Kassandra's relationship with her own child, or her husband. And so when Natakas dies, you don't care. When your baby gets stolen, you don't care. There's no weight behind it, because they have not built up these relationships and these emotions for the player to empathize with. And so the payoff and the moment that you're meant to be like, oh no, you don't get that, because you don't feel anything. You just get that moment pretty much out of context. Now on top of this, you also have the ending section where you finally take out Amorges, the main villain, who actually wasn't that bad. In a better Assassin's Creed game, he could have been a really good main Templar, and I think that he was acted pretty well. I think he did a great job with the script that he was given, whoever it was, and the script itself was, you know, swings and roundabouts, wasn't amazing. If it had been written by a better writer, Darby McDevitt, then he could have been an alright character, and I think that he could have stood up against, you know, someone like German or someone like Roberts from AC4. Maybe not in terms of actual dialogue, but in terms of, you know, the importance and the gravitas that he had. I thought he was a decent villain, but he was in a bad game, and so very forgettable. But the moment where he dies, you have this confrontation between him and Darius. It's very oddly written, because again, the writer doesn't understand that to have that moment of redemption in their final moments, they have to have that build-up across the game. You have to see across the game and across the story that this person is remorseful. There's bits and pieces to him, and you can see that unraveling, but he ultimately is the bad guy. And at the end, he finally gets a moment where he shows remorse, and he's like, look, I'm gonna die. Darius, you're my brother, and, you know, I'll always feel that love for you and respect for you, even if we were enemies. But that moment comes out of fucking nowhere. This character has no development, and they just give you that moment as if it's a payoff, but it's not a payoff to anything, because there was no setup, there was no build-up, and the writers don't understand that. An example of this done right would be with Haytham Kenway. Over the course of the game, you see bits and pieces of him, especially when him and Connor are together. You get to see his remorseful side. You get to see why he's so conflicted. And then at the end, although he doubles down and he sticks to his guns and he's like, look, this is who I am, I'm not going to apologize. He, you know, wears his heart on his sleeve with Connor, and he has that moment of redemption, and that is well earned, and it's a great payoff. This game doesn't do that, and it's bad. Now I think it's time to talk about the main meat of the the main meat of the issues when it comes to this DLC. So the first thing I want to go over is the line, all things are permitted.
The greater good, Cassandra. All things are permitted.
What was that then?
The character says at the end of the game, I can't exactly remember his name, and I don't really care enough to look. He's not important. It's not important. A lot of people might see this as nitpicking, with some people even saying on my stream, it's not as if nobody's ever said something like that before the Assassins. And I mean, do you really need me to explain why that's not a good argument at all? That argument is basically nullifying Ubisoft's wrongdoing in flippantly using the maxim of the Assassin's Creed by suggesting it was never important or poignant to begin with, because anybody could have said it at any point, so it's okay to use it whenever you want. So in order to justify Odyssey for whatever reason, you're essentially disregarding the previous games where that phrase was hugely poignant. You can't just go around throwing that famous Assassin's Creed line around whenever you feel like it. What was even the point? It was an irrelevant character from the Order who becomes the Templars, saying a variation on the maxim of the Assassin's Creed. Why though? What did that serve other than to make the maxim seem far less important than it was? And it's not as if that were a coincidence, because they make a point of giving it this dramatic feel, so what on earth was it for? It just makes a mockery of that phrase, everything is permitted, and it's so silly. It's the same as in that one Curse of the Pharaoh side mission. There was no reason to just worm in a variation of nothing is true, everything is permitted. It's just unnecessary and serves no purpose. It's simply silly writing, and I can't for the life of me figure out why they felt it necessary to put it in there. This retcon, that Aya is a descendant of Cassandra, is a desperate attempt to link Odyssey to Origins for a clear reason. They want to continue the trend of having superpowered main characters. Clearly moving on to the next Assassin's Creed game, we'll be in Rome and we'll be playing as a descendant of Bayek and Aya, assuming they at some stage got back together, and that character will also be a descendant of Cassandra. And that way they can provide the superpowers whilst also closing the Ancients trilogy in Rome, whilst also providing weak fan service in place of an actually meaningful sequel with characters that we care about. I can see through all of their bullshit, and I hate it immensely. It also fails to line up with canon, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so we need to talk about this final scene. So, Odyssey takes place 300 years before Origins, so Aya isn't Cassandra's daughter, her son is Elpidios, it's a boy, and then 300 years later, Aya is a descendant of Cassandra. A lot of people have got this mixed up, I don't know how, but a lot of people have, and they're just like, it's Cassandra's daughter. It's not, that's really weird, silly. It's also funny to note, I thought I'd bring this up, and it just makes it even more silly, that Aya is a descendant not just of Cassandra, but of Pythagoras, Darius, and Leonidas. And if you don't think that's silly, then I'm sorry, I can't explain why, it just is, isn't it? And finally, the next point is that they show a time lapse to show the passage of time, and the way they and the way they do that is by showing the pyramids being built. And a lot of people have said, oh, it might not be the pyramids. Well, it is, because the Sphinx is there, so it's the pyramids of Giza specifically, which we'll get onto. Even if it were another pyramid, the last pyramid in Egypt, I think, was built, I think it was something like 700 years before Odyssey takes place. So even still, it's dumb. But it's not, they're the pyramids of Giza because they're next to the Sphinx, which we also see being built. Now, the reason this is so egregious is... I can't even believe I'm saying this. The pyramids of Giza were built 2,000 years before 2,000 years before Odyssey. They were 2,000 years old. What the fuck? Now, I've seen a lot of people argue the point that, that's dumb. Obviously, they knew they were 2,000 years old. They just did this time lapse to show the passage of time. Do you know how fucking stupid that is? They used 2,000-year-old landmarks just for some reason showed them being built to show the passage of time. But that doesn't make any fucking sense. They're 2,000 years old. That doesn't make any sense. Let me give you something to think about if you're still not sure as to why this is stupid. It is the exact same. Actually, do you know what? It's not as bad. This would be not as bad. It would be just as bad, but in terms of timescale, not quite as bad. The Colosseum was built in the year 72. The construction started in the year 72. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is set in Rome, where the Colosseum is. Set in the year, I mean, it's about 1500. The ending section of Brotherhood shows Ezio tracking down and destroying the rest of Cesare's army and his forces and his supporters and coming after him with the apple. That is it's a short period, but a lot of years pass. Now, Brotherhood did the clever thing of showing the time in the corner, so you knew time was passing, which they could have done in Odyssey, but they didn't. If they'd have done the same thing, what they would have done is shown Ezio walking while the Colosseum was being built. Even though the Colosseum was already built and was near about 1,500 years old. Do you see what I'm saying about how that wouldn't quite have been as bad? Because it's actually not as old as the pyramids. It's the same thing. The pyramids were 2,000 years old, and just to show the passage of time, they showed the pyramids being built as if they weren't already built. Why? The more I think about it, the more stupid it is. Do you know what else it's like? Imagine they want to show the passage of time in Unity. They've just showed the Notre Dame being built for no reason. It's so silly, isn't it? When you think of it in those terms, how fucking silly is that? How silly is that? The reason they did it is because they wanted to show passage of time and they wanted to show location. So they're like, okay, everyone knows pyramids means Egypt. Passage of time will show the pyramids being built. They didn't even consider they were already 2,000 years old at the point they were showing them being constructed. Oh my god. Let's try another one. Imagine they wanted to show... Imagine there was a modern day game and they wanted to show the passage of time. Okay, take it... Okay, like this. Desmond ran away to New York. Imagine they wanted to show the passage of time between Desmond being 16, running away to New York, being in New York for the first time, and him being kidnapped by Abstergo in New York. Those were around about, I think it was 10 years apart, something like that. They want to show the passage of 10 years. So they show Desmond walking through New York with the Empire State Building being built. Even though it's already been built for like... What? Fucking 70 years. It's the same thing, but worse. Far worse. But people seem to be okay with it. And I don't understand why. It's such an odd concept to me that people... 2,000 years. Do you know how long that is? The pyramids were as old to Cleopatra as she is to us. That's a long time. So showing the pyramids being built in 300 BCE is the same as showing Cleopatra wandering the streets of New York in 2012. It's just that simple, and it's... So if it was done on purpose, it is worse. That is not a reason for it being okay. If they did it on purpose, that's worse. I hope it was a mistake. It's still bad if it's a mistake, but I fucking hope that it was a mistake and they didn't do it on purpose. Okay, so something I wanted to properly address was that this retcon is not only a desperate attempt to link things together in a last-ditch effort to have their next installment make sense in the wake of Odyssey, but it's also a mess in terms of lore. So let's talk about this. Aya is a descendant of Kassandra, who is effectively a demigod, someone that is practically the closest thing to a living Isu we've ever seen, someone with the powers of the Isu themselves, and this makes her bloodline incredibly strong. Now previously, before Kassandra, we've seen people that were referred to as having high concentration of first Civ DNA. Desmond was one of them, as was Altair and Ezio. However, bear in mind, what everyone considered high for Desmond was actually a 0.952% concentration of first Civ DNA. Not even 1% of Desmond's DNA was Isu. Take a look at sages, for example, who have around 5 or 6% Isu DNA, and that was deemed exceedingly high. These characters, for example, Desmond or Jaman, had the innate ability to use Pieces of Eden. We see time and time again they only need come in contact with Pieces of Eden in order for them to activate. Even characters like Al-Mualim, who to our knowledge had no Isu DNA, could wield the apple with sufficient research on it. So why, in Assassin's Creed Origins, when Aya, a descendant of Kassandra who at the very least should have had a concentration of anywhere between 10 to 20% of first Civ DNA, not just any Isu DNA, but Kassandra's Isu DNA, which is exceedingly strong, giving her and Pythagoras had no difference in ability, even though you'd assume Kassandra's blood would have been diluted by Marini's, why didn't Aya show any signs? Nothing at all. Never in Siwa did we see her drawn to the temple. When she held the apple or was near the apple, we never saw the pieces activate or do anything at all. With someone like Aya, who is supposedly the highest concentration of first Civ DNA we've seen other than Kassandra, coming into contact with a piece of Eden, something should have happened in that instant. Bear in mind, Khemu was also a descendant of Kassandra, yet he exhibited no signs of anything when in the temple under Siwa and coming into contact with the Apple of Eden. This is the clearest and potentially the worst retcon we've seen from Assassin's Creed. And after the other things that I've explained, this is probably also one of the worst Assassin's Creed products I've ever experienced. They've taken Origins and they've absolutely fucked it. They had to take Origins and fuck it! Ubisoft! Why? Now, one of the other things I wanted to discuss was the hidden blade. Darius takes off his hidden blade, puts it in a box, and he takes it with him to Egypt with Elpidios, whose descendant is eventually Aya. Now, it's basically suggested that that hidden blade was handed down, and that's why Aya has it in Assassin's Creed Origins to give to Bayek. But she says in Origins that she got it from Cleopatra, and that it was the blade used to kill the tyrant Xerxes. So she had no idea she was related to Darius. She didn't even know his name. She has no idea that she's related to Kassandra and where she came from. She has no idea. She doesn't know where the hidden blade came from, and so it obviously wasn't passed down to her. So how on earth did Cleopatra get her hands on the hidden blade? Why did she give it to Aya? What the fuck was any of that? Someone sent me a Reddit post where someone's compiled a bunch of non-facts, which is what I like to call them, because you essentially use them as reasoning based on nothing to set aside issues with something, normally with a good product. So imagine a game is just so good, but there's little discrepancies, because there will be. Writers aren't perfect, and so there's little discrepancies and consistency issues with their writing. And so you would use what I would call non-facts, which is just speculation and, you know, justified reasoning to make it all make sense so that you can just enjoy the product that otherwise is pretty much perfect. But people have been doing that with Odyssey, and I don't think Odyssey deserves that kind of treatment, especially since these are such glaring issues. So let's begin. So the first point they use is that Aya is half Greek. Now, yes, half Greek, not half Greek, meaning her mother was Greek and her father was Egyptian, or vice versa. Half Greek. There are 300 years between her and Kassandra, meaning she'd have to be, if that were the case, she'd be like 5% Greek, not half Greek. So that's fucking irrelevant. Completely fucking irrelevant. If that was anything to do with her relation to Kassandra, how would she know? How would she know? That makes no sense. If her saying she's half Greek was based on her relation to Kassandra, how would she know? Her saying she's half Greek is because her mother or father was Greek and the other parent was not. That's where that comes from, not from her relation to Kassandra, who she knows nothing about. So that's irrelevant. That doesn't change a thing. Doesn't change a thing. And the next point in this post talks about the leap of faith, and I'm not going to go into this. I've already discussed this on my last video. I'll link both of those in the description if you want to go and check those out, where I do go into detail about why it makes no sense for the leap of faith to be done by both Kassandra and Darius separately, let alone that then being how Bayek learned it, because we know he did. Okay, I'm not getting into this right now. You can go and check that out in my other video. It's just dumb shit. The next bit says that Aya saw the sphere in the C1 vault. Bayek did not react to it at all, which implies Aya was the only one who could see it, which shows her Isu blood. Now, I don't know whether they're talking about the apple or whether they're talking about the globe, because she just says sphere. I assume she's talking about the globe. Bayek did see the globe. Do you know why Bayek saw the globe? Because Layla sees the globe! She's reliving his memories!
Wholesale!
We're playing as Layla, who's reliving Bayek's memories. If Bayek didn't see the globe, we wouldn't see the globe. Of course Bayek's... Everyone saw the globe. Whew. The next bit is talking about when Khemu died, I decided to fight for the greater good, saying, I'll never stop mourning what we've lost, never, but I must make a world that is larger than our griefs, so that no mother ever again lives what I have lived. She was determined as Kassandra about the fight for the greater good. You can clearly see the parallels of these two during the entire game, so it also makes sense that she later became the founder and leader of the Brotherhood. This is just reading into things. You could also say that, oh, there's parallels between Kassandra and Ezio, for example, or Kassandra and Altair. You could do this with any hero in any game ever. Just because there are similarities does not make sense. That's a dumb argument. You could draw parallels between Batman and Kassandra. It doesn't mean that they're the same. You could draw parallels between Kassandra and Spider-Man. It doesn't mean that there's any relation between the two. They both fight for the greater good after a great loss. It's not what that is the stupidest argument I've ever heard. Now this is another thing that people keep talking about, and it bothers me a lot, right? So the Assassin Brotherhood connects to the Hidden Ones. The Hidden Ones are connected to the Medjai ideology, and the Medjais are connected to Darius and Kassandra. Although Aya's parents were no Medjai, but scholars in Alexandria, the game clearly shows that she has at least 2 Medjai ancestors. Aya was raised by her aunt in Siwa, a village with a long Medjai tradition, and she got trained to be a Medjai. The connection is clear. Darius, Medjai, Hidden Ones, Assassins. No. What? No. That's not... What? Okay, so for one, I'm not sure whether you've got the idea that the game clearly shows that she has at least 2 Medjai ancestors. I don't know whether that's from the final scene where they're wearing white robes, so they probably must be Medjais. That's a really weird connection to draw. On top of that, the Hidden Ones are connected to the Medjai ideology only through Bayek. It's not like he's taken Medjais and evolved it into assassins. The ideologies that are instilled in Bayek, he then instills in the Assassin Brotherhood, but he's not saying that the Assassin Brotherhood is born of the Medjais. He leaves the Medjais behind to start the Brotherhood. He doesn't evolve the order. So though it's irrelevant, they're 2 separate orders that Bayek just happens to be a part of both. That's not it. On top of that, how are the Medjais connected to Darius? What the fuck does that mean? That is the weirdest connection you've drawn across this whole post. What? That physically makes no sense. Darius wasn't related in any way to the Medjais. That doesn't make any sense. This is all these are disconnected things that Ubisoft have tried to connect in the most fucking dumbfounded way, and that you've tried to make apologies for. It's absolute nonsense, and it's Ubisoft apologist behavior at its fucking finest. Jesus. Now, the final thing I wanted to touch upon is a theory that I have. In the Sanctuary in Assassin's Creed 2, we saw many statues of characters who were assassins or contributed significantly to the Assassin Order, and so were honoured as assassins years later. Now, so far we've seen 3 of these in games. Amunet in Origins, Darius in Odyssey, and Altair in Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and Revelations. Now, I have a theory. Personally, I believe they're aiming to round up all these Sanctuary assassins and make them related. So far, we know Darius and Amunet are related, which is just fucked. On top of that, I believe that Kassandra will end up killing Alexander the Great and becoming Iltani. Now, the reasons for this is because Iltani would then be related to Darius and Amunet, leaving just Kulan Gal, Wei Yu, and Leonidas, which I believe they'll try and incorporate in the upcoming Rome game. And honestly, it all adds up. Not entirely sure how the other 2 would factor in, as Kulan Gal is active in the 13th century in Mongolia, although he did come into contact with Altair, Maria, and Darim at one point, so who knows. As for Wei Yu, he was active around 200 years or so after Odyssey, give or take, in Imperial China. So how they'll get these involved, I'm not sure, but if you suggested to me 10 years ago that Darius and Amunet from the Sanctuary were actually related, I'd have called you an idiot. So anything's possible. I'm not entirely sure why they'd want to do this, or what purpose this even serves, but maybe Ubisoft just thinks that it's cool. And it's really not at all. It's really fucking silly, but... oh god, stop. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I tried to go as in-depth on all of these things as I possibly could. The AC YouTuber inside me couldn't help himself, and it really riled me up and grinded my gears. If you want to see my full reaction to everything, I will link in the description the first 2 review type things I did on episode 1 and episode 2 of The Legacy of the First Blade, as well as the stream I did for episode 3 if you want to hear my thoughts as they happen. But other than that, I've really got nothing else to say. I'll be streaming the Atlantis DLC so we can see how further they fuck this into the ground, as well as streaming the Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered when it comes out later this year. Me and my girlfriend are going to play through the whole thing in one day and just get fucking drunk. during it, so that'll be hilarious. So don't forget to tune in for that. If you don't already subscribe, go and subscribe if you want to. Go check out my other videos. I've just started a new series called The Jazz Lounge, which is a chill-com series where I talk about video games. I just sit down and talk about things. It could be any topics. Go and check that out. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about potentially on that series. I would really appreciate it, as well as a bunch of other things that I've put out over the past few days. I'd appreciate you going and checking all that out. But that's essentially it for this video. I don't really have anything else to say. I think that I've tried my very, very best to get all of this out. But, yikes. Ashraf? Darby, maybe? You got your work cut out for you. I don't envy the job that you have to do in making a good game next. But if you want a hand, I'll help you out in confidence. No one has to, you know, no one has to know that I helped. You don't even have to pay me. Just, you know, hit me up. If you need any help, I wouldn't mind. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching, and I'll bloody see you all next time in my next upload. God. Yeah. Yep, and that's it. And I'll see you all next time. Goodbye, gamers.